Good evening. Glad to see so many people here during midterms. I know there's a lot going on right now. So I'm not going to show any slides, but I'm going to say a couple of things about Martin Gran, who's here from Snøhetta. The title of his lecture is People, Process, and Projects. I mean, we all know Snohetta here at SCI-Arc, obviously. I think Craig was here last year in March, something like that. Craig Dykers, who is one of the founding principals of Snohetta, also happens to be a U.S. citizen working in Norway, which is a whole interesting story, which I won't get into. I think that tonight it'll be interesting to see how Martin talks about the firm and this issue of brand identity and architecture, I guess, in comparison to how Craig Dykers might do it. I guess that's one thing I'll be listening for. But let me digress. I want to just read his bio for a second, and then I've got a couple of comments before he gets up here. Okay, so official bio. Snohetta is a place that nobody is from, but anyone can go to. Snohetta began as a collaborative architectural and landscape workshop and has remained true to its transdisciplinary way of thinking since its inception. Their work strives to enhance our sense of place, identity, and relationship to others, and the physical spaces we inhabit. Whether feral, very nice, whether feral or human-made, museums, markets, reindeer observatories, landscapes, dollhouses get the same care and attention to purpose. I also like that. It sounds like a Latour litany for people who know what that is. Martin is a partner and managing director in Snohetta Brand Design. Prior to this, he was Scandinavian Design Group's new business director and strategic advisor, responsible for major brands in Europe and the Nordic region. In 2006, he worked at McCann Erickson, New York, with clients like MasterCard and Air Canada. He began his career at Leo Burnett Insight in 1998 as a strategic planner. From 2000 to 2003, Martin was a director at Leo Burnett Advertising Agency. Okay, so at SCI-Arc we ask our students, a student committee, to invite certain lecturers to our lecture series, and Martin is one of those. Okay, so a couple of thoughts just to kick this off. First, I noticed the tagline on the Snohetta website, quote, "Always be generous." I think that sounds like pretty crafty positioning for the office. Who can really be against generosity? It is worth engaging the term generosity in terms of what it is saying about architecture in 2016 and how mass media understands the role of the architect in society and what things architects can best provide. Just how can architects be the most generous to the world they operate in? Always be generous. It reminds me a little bit of Google's "Don't be evil" motto from back in the day, which was a very distinct positioning within the high-tech world, and it was very fresh at the time. Of course, we all know the story of how they, in 2012, actually began to pull or pull back on that motto. It was an NPR story that had to do with business practices or other issues. And since then, of course, as everyone knows, Google has become Alphabet conglomerate. And Alphabet's new motto is "Do the right thing." So don't be evil, do the right thing. Interesting. For Google, doing the right thing sounds entirely and qualitatively different from not doing evil. It's more than just a switch from morality to ethics, which anyway seems like better territory for a multinational corporation to inhabit. It also switches from negative to positive terms and disassociates the word evil from any perceived bad acting or actors. So Snohetta's motto, "Always be generous," offers an ethical way to act that is much less dogmatic, and it seems to be a driver for them in terms of the structure of the practice. From the way they literally furnish their office in a lateral way, to the way they structure their leadership on a revolving or rotating basis, to the way they offer multiple disciplines under one roof. So Martin is here tonight as both partner of Snohetta at large and as their director of brand design. Many of you have seen their brand design, including the Norwegian currency, which is actually really quite beautiful if you haven't seen it. He's also in the position of talking about brand identity on the one hand, but also about the architectural work of the office. I think that's a pretty interesting position to have, and I, for one, will be listening intently to hear where the language of brand identity and the identity of the company intersects with the language of architecture, and whether one can affect the other in concrete terms. In his lecture at Belgrade Design Week, Martin spoke both about Snøhetta's practice as based on a holistic Norwegian model, where we all want to be equal. He goes on to say that it is conversations that bring great designs, and that their work, in particular the Oslo Opera, is a social project rather than an elite cultural exercise. The main design move, you guys know this project, of course. The main design move is to slide an oblique public ground partially into the water and create a stage for social engagement. Crucially, I think in keeping with Snøhetta's motto, Martin discusses the project in terms of social activism separate from aesthetics or other disciplinary content. This mode of talking about architecture is one that is currently in the air, and I think it's important that we interrogate it. Maybe that discussion already started at Mark Gage's Aesthetic Activism Symposium 2 weeks ago. Finally, Martin brings up another project in that discussion, their Snøhetta's National September 11th Memorial Museum Pavilion, which he talks about in terms of its direct social effect on the minds of people. He says, when you work at Ground Zero, it is not so much about architecture, but about feelings, so we hired a psychologist as part of our design team. He doesn't say specifically how that transforms the architecture, but he hints that the result is possibly more authentic or that it resonates more with humans. So I'd be curious tonight to hear more about how architecture specifically does that. And then finally, I would like to thank Martin and Snohetta for hiring and caring for some of our SCI-Arc graduates. I know there are several working with you now, including Astrid Van Veen, Karsten Huitfeldt, Daniel Berlin, and Kai Reaver. So if you guys are watching, hello in Norway, or wherever you are, New York. So with that, I'd like to welcome Martin Gran to the stage.
Thank you, Tom. That was a nice introduction. We kind of set the bar. We have this thing in Snøhetta that we call ukeslutt. Ukeslutt is a Norwegian word for when the week ends, and then the week ends. It doesn't start the weekend. And we send out information and pictures of what we've been doing that week. So I was going to ask if I can get some light in the audience and I can take a selfie of myself, showing that I actually work. Can we do that? Great. Then if people can kind of, I don't know, say hi or something. Hello. Hello. That's great. Perfect. We have some editors doing this ukeslutt for us, and they sometimes are after us to find content to that ukeslutt. So now I have it, and they're quite excited that I am invited into SCI-Arc and talk. There's a lot of people who I know that are listening to this in Oslo, though hence it's now 4 a.m. in the morning. But I also wanted to say hi from Daniel Berlin and everyone, and I did a little count of how many SCI-Arcs there was here, Tom, so you're quite right. I think you missed one. And these guys are the ones from SCI-Arc. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So, and that's approximately 5% of the whole Snøhetta. So maybe this percentage has some kind of predictability in it. So maybe we'll see each other again. hopefully maybe, working on some projects. This is Marianne and Richard and Hans Martin, Kai and Karsten and Daniel and Astrid. Daniel was just on Messenger here, and he said hi to everyone, and he misses really a lot LA, but most this school. All right, Snøhetta. A little bit hard to pronounce with this letter, so it becomes Snohetta when we talk about when people kind of adopt it in. The name is taken after this mountain, which is a mountain which is 2,286 meters above sea, and it's sort of a representation of what Tom introduced me for, to saying that this is a place that everyone can go to, but not take with them. And that's important for our company, and we do talk about why we have this name a lot. But actually, the name that it was created of these founders, this is how some of the founders back in 1989, we started the company in 87. That was that the whole company actually started with a competition that you probably know, and Craig has told you this, but I want to tell it again. It was a kind of fun story, and that was doing the competition of the Alexandria Library, and it was drawn and executed here in LA with Craig and some of the people from Norway. And they also sat at this location in Norway. And just before they were supposed to set in their proposal for the library Alexandria, they needed a name. And they were sitting on a loft. And under that loft, it was a bar in one of the streets in Oslo, and which is called Dovrehallen. And Dovre is the name of the area of the middle Norway. And Snøhetta, the mountain Snøhetta, was on top of Dovre, the highest mountain on the Dovre area. So they were thinking, well, there's this pub calls the Dovre, and we need a name, and we're on top of that, so let's call it Snøhetta. And everyone, yeah, let's call it Snøhetta. So it had nothing to do with this mountainish, high, visionary sort of construction of this great mountain and everything. It was more about beer drinking. But after, it kind of post-rationalized itself into match a lot with Snøhetta's philosophy and Snøhetta's way of living. Each year, we go up to this mountain. People from all of our offices around the world gather, and we walk up to the mountain. The last person in this line is Hans Martin from SCI-Arc. And we are on our way up. This is an image for 2 years ago. And we try to talk together of who and what we are and why we are it. We don't talk so much about architecture and design, but we talk about other things to try to inspire ourselves to set a course. So this Dovre conversation is a sort of facilitated conversation among ourselves. And we do it in this Reindeer pavilion that we also built. The Reindeer pavilion is an important project for us because it's made in the Dovre area, and you can sit inside it and look up on the mountain Snøhetta, and we discuss. Inside it, we have conversations, and we present ideas and thoughts among ourselves. Going back to indirectly LA and the Alexandria Library that you probably know is an interesting start of how the culture in Snøhetta has evolved. The library competition back in the days was a global open competition. It was 1,200 RFQs for it, and 500 architectural offices in the world were sending in design proposals, and we, at that time, won it. But when the jury announced this in this public hall in Egypt, two surprises came along. The first one was that when they asked for can Mr. Snøhetta approach the stage? There was no Mr. Snøhetta. Up it came 5 young people, all in their 20s, and they had, I mean, at that time they all went around with the 501 Levi's with the hole in their knees and was like kind of long hair and, you know, the 80s things with a so they didn't look, well, you shouldn't, of course, judge anybody by the looks, but this jury said, well, no way, this is not going to happen. I mean, that was a surprise number 2, that they had never built anything in their life. So the jury said, fine, this is an ominous competition, and we have chosen the best project, but this group, who doesn't even have a leader, there's no Mr. Snøhetta, they cannot get these projects. But 4 years after, with our, at that time, Prime Minister Gro Harlem Brundtland, and the state of Norway gave a endorsement for the projects and also a state guarantee for financing up the group that was going to build it. And it was very important for Norway and Europe to start to trade and create connections with the Middle East. So the project happened, and 12 years after, it stood where it stood. Now when the Snøhetta started with landscape and architecture in the beginning, and this was a group with a notion of this is a collective project, the culture already started. It was not an idea that you want to put down in an organization, is something that who you are. So from that point, things has grown into a company with an organizational structure that are quite unlike others I have worked in. The office in Oslo is a old warehouse. It kind of mirrors and reminds a little bit about this building. This was an old trade warehouse for sea exports to Oslo, and we rebuilt it once upon a time in 2006, where we have our everyday lives, and we try to work as best we can. There's a couple of aspects about our office that is important for how Snøhetta and we lay out our work. The first thing is that we all sit on the same level. There is no, you can't see an invisible hierarchy in how we laid out the interior of our office. Craig Dykers, founding father, or Kjetil Thorsten, founding father, and the new intern have exact same setup in how we sit. Same size of desks, same computers, everything, so it's not possible to find anyone who is directing or has some kind of more power than others in the interior. And every second year we revolve our seats in a random pattern, so we don't get any subgroups or a corner of interior architects or the graphic designers do a little clubbing in one of the corners. We wanted to mix and match, and that you can one year jiggle ideas with an interior architect, and another time you work with the financial directors about architectural or design ideas. We think this is important to try to show and live through our interiors that this is our ideology. We also wanted to be as transparent as possible, so we have communal tables, and we have very few offices, meeting offices, so that everything that we do is open for the sort of the Snøhetta public, and people can dig into the work or comment to it while they sit and kind of not planned interact with the people working on it. This office setup is very messy somehow, but it's important for us that it's kind of a not planned interaction into the way we work, and I could see quite a few resemblances about the office here. The other part we also think is important is to try to work as much as we can in our model shops, in our workshops. We have a saying in Snøhetta that we try to think as much as we think as much with our body as with our brains, because we have to use our whole person to make project happen. So making everyone to work in our model shop is important for us. It's so important that we try to make everyone to do private projects. So people use our workshop to fix their panels on the boat, or building a kitchen model, or it's been used all the time for private purposes, which we think is a good thing, because you lower the barrier of actually working the analog parts of creating. Unfortunately, it's more men in the workshop than there are women, but we try to push as hard as we can to have everyone in the company to work with our. Well, this is Hans Martin, Preston, by the way, that is working on some kind of a model, obviously. The most important tool we have for our projects is dialogue. We want conversations about design. We try to talk as much as we can about design before we start to actually draw something, so that we get the basis for it. We do invite in clients to co-create with us before we start to do the actual work. Well, that means that they have to participate into the creation of any projects. We are very open, not for ourselves, but also for our clients, so that they can work with the models and get dirty with even if they come, if like a financial client comes in with their tie and hot suits, we put on some aprons on them, and we make them create physical models of who they are. We want to sort of try to connect with a sort of equal situation for making strategies. I think it's a you missed when someone is asking, where is our strategy, where is our plans, referring to a PowerPoint document or some kind of a strategy consultant that has to be there to talk about what is the strategy, you failed. I mean, if you don't internalize what you're going to do, and if you can't talk about it during your breakfast with your 14-year-old daughter, the strategy has somehow failed. So we want them to kind of forget the PowerPoints and the Word documents and try to work with strategy in real life. And that needs conversation, and that needs also to see if we can work with physical objects in our process. Now, Tom referred to the 9/11 memorial, and what we did at that time, we chose to not present any design in the competition, and yes, brought in a psychologist into it to enlighten that this is about emotions and not design. And this is something that the committee embraced, and we won the project. The project is the one, very small one, down there between the two footprints. And it also came as a surprise at that time where Mr. Bloomberg was in the committee. He was asked to join a workshop in Snøhetta, and he was he had this vision about that he's gonna, as he always do, kick off the project with a visionary speak and then go. So the cars were kind of waiting outside, and he said, no, here's an apron, and here's our model shop, and let's start to work. And he was there for 4 hours, and we were working with everything, and he was a little bit, wait and see mode before you got warm. But after that, he recognized that this is a good way to work, that you co-create of what a project is. It opened for 2.5 years ago, and if you are in New York, try to visit it. It's a nice pavilion. In Oslo, we did this opera house that you know, and talking about generosity, this was a sort of a walk or talk of a generosity project, because the state has given the property of building an opera, and we thought it was the opposite of a generosity. It was a very, very small property. There was no room for any public places or parks. We had to use the whole property for building the building. So we said, well, damn it, just let's tilt the building so people can walk on it and interact with society. And our state regulation department, they struggle a bit about this project because they have numbers to categorize projects, and a public space has a category number and a building has another one. And this is both a building and a public space, and they can't file it in the right place because you can't have double up things. And we kind of like that. It's distorting a little bit of what we're used to, and like that this has become a building where you actually can interact on it. Making this as something that as a public place, or maybe it's a park, was of course our intention, but we were kind of blown away about how much this project has given back to the public. So having concerts, and it's been embraced of everyone in Norway, and it's now become Norway's #1 tourist attraction. Not the fjords or ski jumps or whatever, the Oslo Opera House, which is a very fantastic place to be at. Now, I was a little bit, I was not maybe sure to show this, but I have this little film, which is me on my motorbike. I have an old BMW motorbike from 1978, and I like to fix bikes, and that's not the point, but my aunt, she was in the board of the Oslo Opera House for 8 years, and she's an actor. And she was trying to promote, to get a more female into the film industry. So she called me one day and said, hey, Martin, could I borrow your bike so I can sit on and pretend that I'm James Bond? This is a thing that we want to promote. And I said, yeah, sure, I'll meet you. Yeah, we'll meet you outside the opera and la. And then we discussed a little bit, and then we said, well, why don't we just drive the motorbike up on the opera house? I said, yeah, sure. And then we did it, we filmed it, and I'll show you. This is what happened. Okay, this is me. I'm like pretending being my aunt.
Why me? Because just now, I'm your best chance to survive, with license to kill. My name is Bond. James Bond.
Well, I don't. My aunt didn't know that I was presenting this here, so and I kind of forgot that it's broadcasted. So I'm sorry, my aunt, but okay. Well, a couple of projects. I want to present also a visual identity for a school that we created for some time ago. And before I start with that, I want to just talk a little bit about how we lay out our work with the different disciplines in Snøhetta. Snohetta has almost 30 years long competence of creating concepts. We think that the idea behind any projects is more important than the project in itself, that good design is about good ideas. So creating concepts, that we like to call it in Snohetta, is important for us. And we do that because we want to sort of try to create some kind of meaning into the projects. And sometimes meaning could be equal to complexity, and the design part of Snøhetta is trying to make both create meaning but also create understanding in that meaning. We like to this term called simplexity, when you're trying to make the complex more understandable, not just reducing for reducing itself, but to try to make communications. And this school Kristiana, they came to us and we discussed the strategy with them, and that is that they wanted to be a slightly different school where they don't want to educate people, they want to develop people. I mean, educational institutions are very often, I mean, the best way to get most points out of an educational institution is to become the institution. And when you are really succeeded for that, you can become a professor. Then you're like on the top of being that institution. And this school wanted more talk about humans and that development is important. So the school is located down in Oslo, and trying to then co-create with our clients. There's a couple of images showing around the process. So we said to the school, well, if this school is about your students and the people who work in it, you should try to involve as many as possible into laying out this strategy. So the whole school with 60 people from the administration and 30 representatives from the students came to us, where we had this co-creational workshop trying to create a concept for the school. We believe that good projects comes from within, so they have to work with us. So trying to get them into the model shop, not trying, we take them into the model shop, and they have to make physical objects of their strategy. Well, and we do make physical objects of strategy because we think it's important to, on the one side, have something to present through. It's easier to present something when you actually have something to hold on to. And the other thing is that we try to work with different senses in displaying projects. And after that, the strategy or the concept we're presenting as a small sort of a gallery way, a little bit of how you work here, what I acknowledge a lot. And that led up that we created this concept for them that was transformation. And transformation as a concept for an educational school or institution who wants to develop students and not educate them is, we found that quite suiting. And so we talked about making when a puppy transforms itself into a butterfly, or the transformation through life from a little child to a old woman, or going from the school situation and transform yourself into the work life is important. Now, trying to find something that can visualize transformation, we looked to language. And language is sort of interesting to see where it comes from, because the language is started with a representation of real life. So I'm sorry about the Norwegian here, but the letter A that we see on the way end here is a Latin, in a Latin language as we know it as an A, but it comes from a representation of this physical objects. So language is a sort of we're trying to actually transform real life into something that we can communicate with. So creating this language, we thought we could start to see if we make a language for the school. So we started with a grid and simplified letters, so it started to be something graphic, and we created a visual language for the school that was unique for them. And this language in itself were also then so visually that it creates something that connects them to their identity. So this is the alphabet, which you obviously can read quite easily for the A, B, C, and then it gets a little harder, but put this into context. So this school has appearance in 3 different cities in Norway. This is Trondheim, and if you knew Norwegian, it would be maybe a little bit easier to read it. This is Oslo, and my hometown is called Bergen, and this is how that's presented in this new language. And then we created a logo for the Kristiana University College, and that says Kristiania in the new language, and it creates a pattern also. So this is a text where it says in Norwegian, Hei welcome to Kristiania. This is the new visual identity for the school, and la la la. And the point with this is that when people see it the first time, it's a little hard to understand it. But our designers, working with this for a couple of months, they were so trained in this new language that they could see misspelling and small adjustments in it, looking at this one. And we can put this randomly up, and people, our designers could read it. So what we're seeing now, after the identity has been launched for 1 year, is that the student, as long as they live with the school, they learn the language. So that means that they develop together with the visual identity. So the first year school students, they think it's a little weird, and the graduates, they really knows it and can have adopted an internalized identity. So the identity grows together with the students, it develops. And then when you have transformation, you also can work with transformation in colors and in other aspects than the visual language. And all put together is making a distinct identity that also communicates. So this is a brochure for last year's program. So you can read the different programs in it if you know the language. And it also makes a distinct presentation of their strategy, which is development. Wayfinding and signage in different aspects makes also a sort of a strong frame for how to communicate, and different types of aspects. Now, I don't have a picture of it, but one of the students, we got this picture sent on email to us, and he had tattooed the language on his underarm side, where it says that my name is la 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 in this program. And that's the first time someone has tattooed in our visual identity onto themselves. We thought it was a little crazy, but it shows the power when you make something that people identify themselves with. Talking about another project is a project that tries to create communication through light. What we now are looking at is a recording of light up in the north, which is approximately 70 degrees. So it's above the polar circle, a couple of degrees above the polar circle, where we try to capture the life. So the light. So this is, we created this design with one of the aspects was to put a camera offshore from the oil industry, offshore camera straight up to the sky, and you can sort of capture the light in the Nordic. So there's the Nordic light, and as we all know, probably in the Nordic region, especially up in Norway, it's dark for 6 months, and it's totally light for 6 months during the whole day. Now, this project was initialized by a light company called Zumtobel, which is an Austrian company, and they wanted us to make an annual report. And they were hoping that we would present a lot of Snøhetta projects into that, because they're one of their target groups are, of course, architects and builders, and they want to sort of use the positive heat from Snøhetta into their communication. But it was up for us to do what we wanted to make this annual report. So we wanted to make an annual report to discover light through people. We wanted to explore this Nordic light by talking to 100 years old people who are still living and who has been living in that region all of their lives. So we found 400 years old. And we make this author, that is a writer-author called Snohetta, who interviewed them about how has it been to live in 2 wars, with and without electricity, how's light affected work and love life, and trying to put this onto paper. We also used a fashion photographers called Sølve Sundsbø to take their portraits, and this became this became our take on how to describe light. Now, we also 3D scanned them so that we could have a physical representation of them when we talked about the projects, and this led also to that the annual report became a art exhibition in Berlin. So not only making a light concept through people for the annual report, it also became some to say a exhibition of it. So in Berlin, you could explore the project through the book and the pictures, but also in the physical manifestation. And now there's several different other arts galleries that wants to present the projects. Now, coming to us to try to make a quite sort of conservative annual report, the ideas behind it became important, so that when you have strong ideas, it can influence people. This is Åsne Seierstad, the writer, who is interviewing one of the 100 years old. This is Sølve Sundsbø, taking the pictures of them, and the portraits has been quite magnificent. This is Marie Gulbrandsen, and the three others. It was not that easy to find men, of course, because women outlast us when it comes to age. And there was interesting to see that in Sweden we didn't find that many 100 years old, but much more in Norway, which says something about the district policies in our different countries. Now, this project became so strong and powerful for both Sundtobel and us that we wanted to make a presentation of it digitally. So we tried to see how can we represent light in other forms than the book and the physical manifestation in the gallery. So this is an abstraction of how the light is where these 100 years old people were living, and we created a web page where we could explore the light real time. This web page is a page where you can log into, it's open, and you can review the light. So it's directed, these cameras are placed exact same place where these 100 years old were living, and then you can explore the light yourself. For instance, you can take a look into where the Nordic Lights happens, and well, six months of the year, it's as a very dark web page, and 6 other months it's totally bright. So, and you can also review recordings of the light and also look into the project in itself. This is also a way to read the book digitally, so you can see the pictures and reviewing the text, reading the text, and presenting the whole project in itself on this web page. Now, this is a very commercial project that has been grown up to be a very important one for us. But Maria's grandson called us after we sent up the book up to the north, and he said that she would like to read it herself because she is so quick and healthy, and the book is in German and English, and she only knows Norwegian. So could we please send up the transcript for the interview? That was obviously done in Norwegian. And we said, yes, we'll do that. And 4 days later, we got an email back from Stian saying that she really liked to read it. It was a quite good representation of who she were and what she was and what she said. But unfortunately, it was the last thing she did. She died 4 hours after, and the family used the annual report to read from it in the funeral. So imagining our designers working so closely with this project and getting those feedbacks from the people in the projects is been fantastic. So these 400 years old people are truly our heroes in this project. Well, talking about money, we're doing the banknote design, and I have this is a 500 kroners, and some of the people I got to know, they wonder if I was going to give it out. I didn't think of that, but it could be. It's worth around $50, $60, so I'll think a little bit about it. But it's a project that are so enormously small. I mean, our design, creating the Memorial Pavilion or redesigning Times Square or working with a master plan and infrastructure system in Jeddah, compared to this very, very little piece of paper, is a nice kind of a macro and micro evidence of our projects. On the other hand, we think this maybe is one of the most social projects that we ever did. All the time that this design is changing hands so much. I mean, no other projects are shifting hands so much that maybe money are, and we think it's been an important and a really fun project for us. Creating this this job had a highly security measures, and there is I learned, and I think if you explore the US dollar, you will find a same. This is a little secret, I think, but one of the security measures is that there's 5 small dots. 5 small dots. These dots you see in the design, and they are incorporated into all currency all over the world to make the Xerox machines and Photoshop software to stop working. If you try to put this bill onto a Xerox machine, it stops and it comes up with a red sign that says not allowed. You cannot do it. And that is that formation of the 3 dots that are incorporated into every currency design in the whole world. So if you want to get into the Xerox machine business, you have to install this software to detect money. If not, you will not be licensed to be a copy machine seller or something. So this is just one of the things that we have to learn about this project, creating it. But for us, of course, the design itself was important. So we worked with a concept of it. It was a predefined concept from the Central Bank of Norway, which was the ocean. The ocean is very important for Norway. It's one of the world's largest coasts, since Norway is a so long country. And the ocean has given us a lot of how and what Norway are today. Now, we interpreted the ocean into a concept that we call for the beauty of boundaries. The beauty of boundaries has this notion of that when differences meet, things happen. So when cold meet warm, things happen. When women meet men, things happen. When different culture meets, there are things that are evolving out of it. So when the ocean meets land, there also an interesting aspect about it. In those boundaries, things happen. So we wanted to make a design that represented these boundaries in a good way, but we also wanted to talk about a little bit about the history. So we talked about the first paper money ever seen into and the boundaries up to bitcoins, and sort of launched the idea of that maybe this is the last analog money we will ever see. Maybe everything will be digital. We think, on a personal note, that money will overcome. As much as when radio came along, people thought that books will disappear. Why on earth have books when you have radio? And when TV came, for sure, radio would disappear. So we think that this very physical proof of the very important economical institution will succeed. Now, trying to make this modern money, we also wanted to look back to the first graphic representation that we know into art, which is the mosaic, and how mosaic is sort of the building bricks of how we represent things graphically. Also looking into art and art into digital areas. And of course, today in our most known attribute of taking pictures of each other, this is a picture of Moa. He's smiling, but I increased a little bit, so it's only these pixels left of the picture, which then gives the basis for our design. So the design is then set up with these pixels, where we also use a ocean scale for wind, the Beaufort wind scale, to explain the design. So this is mathematically built up, where the 50 kroners, which is this green starts, is the least value, of course, because it's a 50, and those has the smallest pixels. That's the short wind. It's almost like it doesn't blow at all. And then it increases up to the 1,000 kroners, which is the highest currency, and that has almost a full storm in it. So we're using the Beaufort wind scale to present the different aspects of what's happening in the ocean, and everything overglides on each other. It overlays to each currency, so it's sort of representing the whole long coast of Norway. And talking about the boundaries, this very kind of rational, hard, pixelated design. On top of that, we have made this pattern, which uses the exact same Beaufort scale, but is reversed. So it got long, short waves on the small pixels on the 50, and very high waves or wind scales on the 1,000. And then together, it's set into a design where we also had a predefined motif from the bank. And the 50 kroners was defined as what the ocean has given us in meeting people. So this is a lighthouse in the horizon that is highly abstracted. And this is how we communicate with the world. How has the ocean made us communicate with the world? And this is a cargo ship presented in the horizon. And this one is about how the ocean has given us food. So this is a fishing boat. And some newspaper, I think it was New York Times, I guess, who said that, well, Snøhetta did quite a good job promoting the Oslo Opera into a money design for themselves. But that's not, of course, the case. But if people co-create ideas into this design, I think our mission was fulfilled. This is an oil platform and how the ocean has given us the welfare state in Norway. So the oil is, of course, an important aspect of how Norway's society is today. And at last, the 1,000 kroners is how the ocean will lead us into the future. And there is the horizon open, no objects. It's about what's going to happen into the future. So together, this is, well, Craig likes to talk about this, but saying that this is an art piece worth 1,850 kroners. Which is cool, and it's going to be launched in 2017. And we're now at the point working with how to communicate the project out to the public, since there's been a massively attention into it. So we laid out the money, and we abstracted the colors into a program, giving us a way of talking how to use graphic representation to talk about the project. So these are sketches for some brochures and how this will look. We have this idea of building this warehouse about money design, and this is a little bigger than we got to make it is. So this is what's going to happen. This is actually quite next to our headquarters in Snøhetta. This is not the design, so it's going to be repainted into this. Yes. I now kind of see that the clock is 8. Can I have like 10 minutes more or 5? Yeah? Okay. I want to just talk about a project that has to do with arts. The Munch Museum in Norway wanted to see of how we could start to debate what is art and what is Munch and what has it done for us. how has he inspired others, and will he be everlasting, or is he not relevant anymore? So we created together with the Munch Museum a concept that we call the Plus Munch project, and that we try to combine Munch art with other artists, almost like a dialogue between artists. And we invited in the first other artist called Bjarne Melgaard. And Bjarne Melgaard is a contemporary artist from Norway living in New York. He's very explicit with his arts, and we're combining his artwork together with the Munch. And we did exhibition design and graphic design in a co-creation of how this is going to be represented, and rebuilding the entrance of the museum every time. This is a series of 7 different artists combining with Munch, and putting quite viciously Munch's art together with Melgaard's Munch. We did a catalog, which is not a catalog but a book, and the idea of how to curate the whole exhibition came out of this catalog idea, where we wanted to present his art in a totally random pattern. So this is a gift that shows the book very fast, but the insight of this is that we put all the art of Munch into one folder, and the other art pieces of Melgaard in another folder, and then we made a script that randomly combined Munch arts together with Melgaard's arts. So the curating was only making this frame for combining arts and not choosing and picking it out for the exhibition. And this then became not only the catalog, but the whole curating of the exhibition, presenting art on top of each other or mashed together in a totally random pattern. This project was I must say, we would say well received into the society, but there was a lot of people saying that this project is a disgrace for Munch, and how can we do this modern expressionist into our beautiful Munch. It even got so far that someone filed the museum to the police, and there was almost like it was a debate that never stopped about this exhibition. But the museum has increased their visitor by 6 times after this, and no end will take on it. So for the museum, it's been a fantastic success combining these different artists. 2 of you that I met during the day independently talked about the author Knausgård. That's been, maybe more of you have been reading about My Struggle. And the next combination for next year's is something we call for New Light, Munch in the New Light. And we're going to combine Knausgård's artwork together with the Munch's visual art. So the next exhibition will be, we haven't done, at least the museum hasn't done, to combine an author together with a painter, and trying to make a sort of a connection between those two. The very last project is a project that we lost. We were in the competition of building the Obama Presidential Center. All I have learned, all presidents in the United States gets a library after, and that's because you have to store all documented communication through Congress somewhere, and then you get the library. And we were delighted that we were shortlisted for working with this project, and a very great but smaller office won it. Todd Williams and Billy Tyson Architects that are good friends of Craig. But we wanted to just present a couple of small slides about the projects, not so much about architecture, but about the concepts. We wanted to try to talk about, through the library, what is important for Barack Obama and democracy in these times. That people's voices are extremely important, And without people using their voices, the democracy would collapse. Today we can talk a lot about democracy in US states and with Trumps and everything, but now and then we were like asking, what if we're going to build a museum for Trump? Would we do that? That would be a debate. But as long as maybe it could influence somehow, it would, either way. Back to the voices. We thought about creating a project where we wanted to record voices. We wanted to talk to people and making a voice generator that the voices that we generate. One idea was to talk to 1 to 8 year olds and talk about what is freedom. And then we record these voices, put them into the generator, and the generator creates a design, and that becomes the design of the library. So that's the people who is designing the museum, the library, and not ourselves. So what we did was that we, together with our local architectural partner in Modi Nolan, we went out to Chicago, where this is supposed to be built, and we spoke to people, interviewed them about what makes you happy, and started to record these stories into a web page. And we created and designed this web page that was something that we wanted to be together with the architectural drawings, and the committee opened up that we could present also a web page into the project after we had the idea. So in the middle here, you have Kim André. He's the graphic designer and a coder. He's coding and doing programming, and he and his friends from Modi Nolan walked streets of Chicago talking to people about what makes them happy, and that created the basis for design. So you could review the webpage. This is still out, where you can have it, and it was fantastic. We got a note from the White House that from the IT department about security that yes, we confirm that the president has and the first lady has reviewed the web page for 22 minutes, and all kinds of security measures around it. And also, when we had the briefing in the White House, it was for 1 hour. All the architects got 1 hour, and we don't often write resumes and minutes from meetings. But after this meeting with Barack Obama, the first lady couldn't be there. We got a minute where it's like with all that was said in that room. It was like, and then Elaine moved on a chair, and then we laughed, and then we said, and it was fantastic to read. My father, he's a professor in social science, and works a lot with governments and whatnot, and I was not allowed to send this out to anyone, but I had to send it to my father, and he thought it was fantastic. It was the closest he had ever gotten to American presidents once upon a time. So these stories you can overlay it, watching it, so you get to...
Grandbabies make me happy. I got 6 of them. They range between the ages of 3 and 18.
I mean, you know, the thing that makes me happy is family, friends, and having a roof over my head, able to put food on my table, provide for my family, and, you know, enjoy the air out here in the community itself.
Eat right is very important to me. The breakfast is the most important meal for me. I like vegetables, fruits, grains, beans. I'm sorry, but I don't eat the meat.
And some talk more about how they were scared of their lives, and people got shot on the streets, and others talked about everyday things. So this was generating insights and things, content for our design process into it. So by that, I thank you for your attention. And I guess it's time for some questions or something.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.